So in the last video, we were introduced to this formula. This is a great formula to find any term as long as we know what the first term is and the common difference. But let's look at this problem. This problem gets progressively harder because they don't give you the first term and they don't give you the common difference. And they don't even show you what the series of numbers are. They're asking you to find the 23rd term, and they tell you that the second term is 4 and the fifth term is 22. So how are we going to do this? Long and very tedious, but what I'll do is my best to explain it and to re-explain it. We're going to start with this formula. And our goal right now is to find T1 and D so that we can find the 23rd term. So we can only use what's given. So we know that the second term, which is equal to 4, is equal to the first term, and I'm just using the same formula, plus n, and we know that this is the second term, minus 1 times d. That's all we're given. So let's look at the substitution because it's a little lengthy. We can only use this information so that we know the second term, which is equal to 4, equals to T1, which we still don't know, plus n, and we know because we're using the second term, minus 1, and then we leave d as itself. Now let's go ahead and just solve right here. So we have 4 equals T1 plus 2 minus 1 is just D. We're going to get T1 by itself, so we can go ahead and subtract D to both sides. T1, which is our first term, is 4 minus D. Now we're going to use this and substitute it. Now we know what T1 is, even though we don't know the exact number, at least we know it's 4 minus D. Now we're going to use this and use the same equation here. Stay with me, I know this is kind of complicated, but we know we can use this information. We know the fifth term, which is equal to 22, equals T1, and what is T1 now? T1 now is 4 minus D. It's a substitution method. Once again, we're looking for, we know we can use this information, so the fifth term, which is 22, equals the first term plus n, and n was 5, because it was the fifth term, minus 1 times D. Okay, feel free to keep watching this video over and over until it's more comfortable. Now we're going to solve for this. 22 equals 4 minus D plus 5D minus D. Or you can just say it's 4D. I think that's easier for most of us. 5 minus 1 is 4, so we have 4D. Okay. Again, let's keep solving for D. 4 minus D plus 4D is going to equal to a positive 3D. Our goal is to find D. We're almost there. Subtract 4 to both sides. We have 3D equals 18. Divide both sides by 3. Both sides by 3. And we get D equals 6. Now that we have D, we can find T1. Because D is now 6, we can find T1, which is negative 2. So now we have T1 is negative 2, and our D is 6. Now I have to erase all this, but before I do, I want to explain one more time before we find the 23rd term. we can only use what's given. We know we need to find the 23rd term, and we'd like to use this formula, but the T1 and the D are missing. So, based on what they give you is the only thing you can use. So we know that the second term equals 4. That's given. So we use the original formula. 4 equals the first term plus n, which is the second term, minus 1 times d. Then we're just solving for T1 here. Even though there's two variables, we're just solving for T1. We isolate T1 by subtracting d to both sides, and we get 4 minus d equals T1. We're going to use 4 minus d as a substitution for T1 in the next equation. We use the original equation again. This is what I call a generic equation, and we can use the fifth term, T5, which is equal to 22, given, equals the first term, which we substituted, T1, plus 5. 5 is because it's the fifth term. Wherever this is n here, minus 1 times d. Then it's just basic algebra. We're solving for d. Make sure you recognize how to combine like terms. 4 minus d plus 4d is 3d plus 4. Subtract 4 to both sides. Get 18 equals 3d, and then d equals 6. These are just basic algebra steps. Now that we have this, I'm going to plug it in to the original problem. Apologize how lengthy this is, but doesn't seem to be any way around it. So I'm just copying this just so we get more familiarized with this formula. We're going to now look for the 23rd term. We don't know what that is, but we do know that the first term is negative 1. We're just plugging that in. We found that earlier. Plus n, and n is 23. Minus 1 times d. d we found was 6. And you just go ahead and solve that. Negative 2 plus 22 times 6. And our 23rd term is 130. So we just took the generic equation, and now that we have T1 and D, we can go ahead and plug that into our equation and find our 23rd term. So I would highly suggest that you watch this video a second time, or maybe 3 times, just to understand all the substitution that was needed just to get to this step. Okay?